So yeah, you are actively encouraged to speak up at any time, in particular if you're not Prometheus team. Only if we have a call for consensus, then please don't. But at any other time, please, please, please feel encouraged to speak up and take part. So the Staff Summit starts with what we left off last time, just repeating this for the sake of the recording. And today is the 24th of March. Hello, YouTube. We were discussing support for prefixing / adding labels to metrics in client libraries, and we ran out of time. Who wants to continue? Don't fall over yourselves. Björn is asking per chat if anyone has done more research. I see a lot of shaking heads, but
I would expect Chris to be there to discuss that because the issue came into the client Python library.
We can also skip this for next time. All of the people working in the cloud part of Grafana are currently on offsites, which is also why we have those weird backgrounds. So then we can just skip to the next point and redo that point next time, unless someone objects. Okay, then I'm just going to copy this up and prepare it for the next one. Okay. I'm going to try and match what we talk about to the people who we have in the call. We have a pretty old one, but we have Bartek and we have Julian. Tracing support for client Golang / twin library that follows client Golang paradigms for tracing and such. We can discuss this one, or we could discuss warnings, annotation stats for query results. Okay. I see a slight preference for warning and annotations. Björn, can you actually speak? Do you have a microphone? Because else this will be.
I can kind of speak, but not a lot. I lost my voice.
Oh, I hope you don't have the thing.
Yeah, it's unlikely. It'd be better if somebody else could explain, if somebody knows about it. Or just what I've written in the internal notes. Someone could.
I can just read it out. Yeah, you don't sound as if you should be talking a lot, which makes it all the more valiant for you to attend. Thank you. So it's about warnings, annotations, and stats for query results. To explain why and how any potential label matching failed. Warnings about when rate calculations fail because one data point is not correctly in the range, or or zero for non-stale series, or something like you don't have it precisely correct in that rate area or in that rate time window. Query stats in the is part of the response and not just in the logs. Warn about nonsensical usage, for example, a 10th quantile on things. I think this is flipped, like when you just put wrong things in the wrong order, and we can actually detect this. And I think let's stop at that first section. The other thing, which maybe is also relevant here, is like more this self-care and actually easy to hold thing, which Prometheus is historically really bad at, to put it lightly. And just improve the user experience there. Yeah, also histograms and the new ones, or the new histograms, I just read it out instead of paraphrasing. That's probably easier. The new histograms come with many more failure cases that won't cause an outright error, but would benefit from an explanation to the user. When you mix different histograms, the new and the old one, when you have incompatible bucket layouts in aggregations over time, in particular if you have like migrations and floating and such, or partial. And in which form could we include any such potential response? There is a warnings field in the API. Maybe we could use this. Maybe it was even initially meant for this. But would warning even be a good name for any such concept? Yeah, that's the summary. If no one else has any strong opinions, I mean, my own opinion is we urgently need to provide more self-care and more hand-holding within Prometheus to make it easier for people to just get onboarded onto Prometheus. And if Prometheus doesn't do it, other software will, like for example, Grafana does it. And it's not in, like with my Grafana hat on, that's nice, but with my Prometheus hat on, I would much prefer to also have Prometheus have proper error handling and like just better explanations and everything. The immediate problem we will be facing if we do anything like this is the usual with string translations and such, where we need to, like if we decide that we want to do more of this, not only decide how to and on what API endpoint or whatever to emit this, but also do we want to do error codes? Or do we want to have strings which then can be translated with like a proper translation tool or something? I do believe that this needs to be part of the complete discussion.
So you mean translated in other languages?
I would at least like if we make Prometheus easier to hold and to handle, I would at some point like to see a few translations, or at least us supporting translations. And I would, if we go with more strings in a deeper level, which is like not just UI, I would prefer to already think about how we would like to handle this long term and not have a breaking change in half a year or a year when people start really using it. So we at least think about it.
Yeah, I think it's really two different things, right? I would not mix them. We already have warnings now for other things, and not only for this one. So this is just making the engine be able to issue warnings, but we already have all the fields in the API for this. So I am torn that we should link that to any kind of potential translation, which we have never spoken about. So translation would be nice to have, but to me it's completely dedicated and separated from this concern of having more warnings from the API itself. Where is the warning field in the API used? Asked Bjorn. It is used.
Isn't that used on the remote read?
Yes, I think.
I believe it's used
Yes.
to mark, like, essentially something around consistency, around one remote read failing, but you actually don't want to fail the whole query because they're kind of best effort and things around that. So that's why the PromQL engine select has this warning API, right? And by the way, we use it heavily in Thanos. We have like literally a UI pop-up, the same as error, just different color, that mention the warning, and we post lots of different warnings on Thanos UI, which is extension of Prometheus UI. So I don't see why we don't do that.
We already have that. We use the print warnings in the Prometheus UI.
Yeah. Okay. Wait, you said we are using it? So what you are talking about that if it's...
No, we are using it, but only in the remote write API.
Yes,
it
you're
is
right,
not coming from the engine. And we know that, for example, some queries, there is one function, quantile, which can completely fail, and we are not able to tell the user about it. So if you put quantile with something that does not make sense, like it's in the design document, there is a to-do in the code that we should issue a warning, but we don't do it now because we don't have the API. And I think we should have that. We will need to pay attention not to duplicate the warnings, because like some warnings might come on every step. But apart from that, it should just work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree beyond that. Yeah, the examples that are in the document would be indeed correct. The issue is that we will want to be careful about that because, for example, there is only one data point in your age range. This will happen every time when you have a new series coming up and you do a query range and the new series starts at the middle. So it will be, yeah, we will need to do something about the query ranges to see like what we can do about it. But the general idea of implementing that in the engine is fine to me. We could have that behind the feature flag to find all those use cases where we only have series popping in the middle and range functions, that kind of things, but otherwise it's fine to me.
So the consensus, we just do it? Or Arne, Björn is writing in chat.
Sounds like, yeah, we have a consensus.
Björn is asking if we also want or should discuss the other use cases.
What, let me look at the other use cases. The pull request that was linked from Björn has been merged. So I don't know what you mean, Björn, about the other use cases, but you can get statistics in the UI and in the UI if you append stats to the query. And the pull request now even provides statistics for each step if you want them. So, and this is already in the API available as well. Yes, you can ask explicitly to have statistics. Yes.
Yeah, that's already there. I mean, we are not using it in UI. Are we actually? This latency of the query coming from that, I think so. Or is it UI thing? I don't remember even.
I think it might be coming from that.
Maybe, yeah. So there was kind of really similar question around essentially adding trace-like view. In a sense, maybe that's too much, but essentially some kind of more extended statistics for per kind of anyway, it's kind of like storage kind of statistics more, but essentially there is definitely a room for adding more statistics and having this optional on UI and so on. So yeah. Anyway, warnings. Let's go for more warnings in the existing warning field and see how far you get, as Bjorn says. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think the other very useful thing would be to have the equivalent of prominence inside the UI. Because yeah, you can easily see like what matches, what does not match, and now your query is done by Prometheus. So it's like explain what you have as an explain in the database, you would have that in PromQL or in the UI.
Okay, I'm just waiting to see. Okay. Also, we need to read out what is written, because else it's super confusing to watch this recording in the future. Augustine just said that integrating permanence in Prometheus would be really cool. I I mean, that's a Julius question. I agree, it would be cool. Björn, do you consider the complete topic handled? Okay, cool. So let's do a call for consensus, which will be an easy one. Just a moment, I'm not used to working on laptops anymore. Consensus, we will add more where anyone wants to, deliberately not limiting in any way. All agreed? Anyone disagreeing? Very good. Okay. Bartek, Julie. Recording rules in Prometheus agent, Bartek.
Yes, yes. Okay, so idea is very, very simple. Prometheus have recording rules. Prometheus agent doesn't have. And the reason is that there is no querying capability in agent. That's why it's hard to have at the same recording engine. However, there was investigations that was involving something like scrape time rule evaluation that would be kind of nice to have. However, there were many limitations, and one of the limitations, for example, is that ideally we want to have recording rules across scrape targets as well. So there was an experiment by Tom. I don't remember this point, worth to check. Maybe someone have a TLDR, what was kind of problematic there, but it was still experimentation, never done. But the use case exists, right? The use case is very strong. People, essentially use applications like CAdvisor or Cube State Metrics, for example. You can configure some of those things, but at the end, you scrape a lot of data. And those data, those metrics, have lots of random labels like IDs, like partition IDs for like disks or volumes, whatever. It's crazy thing that usually you don't need, but you would like to have this metric, but on aggregated resolution, essentially. So you want to reduce labels to reduce cardinality and essentially have a cheaper end-to-end solution. And you cannot do that without recording rules. There is ability to skip labels on service monitor on Prometheus operator, or essentially a scrape configuration relabeling. You can just drop, series, you can drop labels, but that doesn't aggregate those metrics if you have duplicates, right? So imagine you have a metrics divided by, I don't know, some kind of partition, and then if you remove this partition label, then suddenly you have let's say four series that have different numbers for different partitions. You want to summarize them into one, but you cannot in relabeling. So you will have essentially some scrape warning, I guess, that the scrape was duplicated or something. So that you have like this conflict of metric or something error, right? So you cannot use that easily. So recording rule is again very, very useful, and especially in the era of like SaaS services where you want to send your metrics via agent somewhere else. All of this costs, and cost is really based on metrics and maybe scrape interval as well. So yeah, that's why I would love to have some solution there. So I wonder, first of all, do we want that? Secondly, do we want to focus on scrape recording rules, or there is a way to have maybe a kind of generic recording rule solution somehow? Yeah, what are the thoughts? And I can try to scheme up with what happening with the experiment as well. Anyone have any comments?
For the experiment, I think I know what you're talking about. Tom had something which I think he called in-flight PromQL, which was based on the Grafana agent and basically allowed you to run PromQL on the data you had in the well and such. which was super useful, but also very limited. The major issue is obviously you're not really able to do cross aggregations as you're used to with a larger Prometheus. And this spans several different orthogonal things like the query time range, like not complete visibility of that part which you're scraping, blah, 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 blah. At the same time, if you're careful about the limits, I do believe that this is extremely useful. Julius's point a few months ago was that it's still risky because we would basically enable people to write limited queries without them being able to realize that those queries are limited, and maybe also not even being able to deduce what those specific limitations are in their own use case. And as such might be setting them up for failure and or just frustration, and that might come back on us. And that's also roughly what Robert Fredro mirrored when I discussed this topic with him. All those negatives aside, I do believe that this would be quite useful, both in the ways of recording rules where you actually change stuff. Like we had this concept of tainting and untainting, where you say either you only forward the ones which actually went through a query, or you forward everything, including the original metrics and the ones which basically were recorded. And the last piece here would be, if we do this, I would also like to see alerting. Again, this would be severely limited, but like a super early escape hatch for well-known and well-bounded alerting conditions would be nice.
So I think that we can leverage a concern in multiple ways. First of all, because this requires a dedicated PromQL engine, we could have an engine and disable everything that is using a range, offset, so range selectors and offset. So you would not be able to run a rate there, but you would be able to do the average of the space used, for example. So you would have access to the scrape data. And once we have passed that relabeling, then we only add the target labels, and then we add we do the relabeling itself, so the user can drop the original metrics if he does not need them. So that way you can still have the original use case, which was, I want to compute, for example, to pre-compute the correct average disk space usage with the correct timestamp without having a recording rule that runs not at the same time. And I think if we do that, we could have something which is useful, and the user would know what's correct and not correct, because the engine used would directly throw an error if they try to use a function which will not provide the expected results.
I agree. Limited query capability in this context makes sense to me. Will be totally enough.
Because like the idea is to really like to do like maybe top K average, that kind of things. And then you can just drop the metrics with the relabeling. And I would even say that you don't need the target labels when you query the labels, because the idea is really to do mem total divided by mem use or something like that.
Yeah, and I think it can be per scrape target, right? Because
well, it will have to be per scrape target. If you need more, then you need the recording rule, because I don't see how you can do that, because you don't scrape all the targets at the same time.
Yes, yeah, agree. Cool. So we are leaning towards scrape recording, which I think it's a good start.
But Julian just said relabel. Do you actually mean with relabel config, or do you mean with PromQL per scrape?
No, relabel config would be applied after the recording rule, the per scrape recording rules.
But how you define recording rule? How we can define recording rule in this case?
Well, you define them per scrape job, just like the metric relabel configs.
I mean, I agree with simply not allowing range vectors and such, and simply removing them from the language and just not offering that and just erroring out. I think that's a good idea. I don't think we want to force people to use relabel config. I would much prefer to introduce a drop label or something in PromQL, and I think we used to have this in the super early days, and do everything through PromQL. then force this abomination of relabel config on anyone. You would basically force people to learn, like they need to do things in 2 different places, but even worse, relabel config is even harder to learn and to understand than PromQL. So I would try to avoid this because it's just forcing users to do weird stuff.
I don't see why we force anyone to do anything, because you would just insert the metric, and then if they need to remove the original one, then they need to use the metric relabeling just like they do now. So we don't force anyone.
I mean, in particular for this type of in-flight PromQL, I would honestly prefer to just extend PromQL, and I can also see useful use cases where I drop labels from a result set in normal usage.
This is not about dropping labels.
You said dropping labels, or am I?
Dropping metrics, sorry.
Okay.
That if you want to drop the
That's
original
completely different. Okay, that's
If-
back to the tainting and non-tainting thing, which I because I did think about this quite a bit. So my thinking there was that you have 2 different modes. One is you only forward stuff which is the result of queries which you have run in flight, and the other is you forward everything, including the newly created time series. The thinking behind the first mode is precisely what you're just saying. I can write PromQL queries, and only what is actually returned from those queries is sent on to whatever the agent is sending to. That would be my preferred mode of operation, because I have plain vanilla PromQL. I don't have to do anything else. And I simply, like, I literally prepare my data. You can think of this a little bit like alerts. And like if you have a match, it's sent on, and if not, then not.
Then it means that if you want to keep an original metric, you would need to write it again in the recording rules.
No, because that's the thing where you have those 2 different modes.
Yeah,
Either
but
you add or you replace.
I don't see a use case where users would only want new ones. There will always be
reduction of total amount of metrics and such. This is not per scrape target, but let's say I have an agent, and that agent is scraping 500 devices, and I want to have, like, on a super short time scale, I want to do pre-aggregations and drop tons of metrics before sending them onwards. That would be one of the use cases.
Yeah, totally. You can still do that with scraping everything, adding a recording rule on top, and then only remote write what you need. But then you keep it in memory with the wall. Well, that's kind of weird then. Yeah. So you kind of can achieve that without this logic, no?
I mean, implementation-wise, and I have the lowest knowledge here, but it's probably easiest to just have like 2-hour local storage in memory and done.
Yeah, I agree with
that's the case.
I agree with Bartek that you can have you could do that with a Prometheus doing remote write, but.
Oh, yeah, so I'm kind of confused. So, I mean, we're talking about the same thing, but let's focus on the user experience, where we would configure those scrape rules. Are we talking we could put it in a scrape configuration, but maybe near the relabeling or inside relabeling, but that was kind of you have a right point, Richie, that might be hard to use. Maybe not, right? But what are the other options? Are we considering like having a normal recording rule API like configuration that is marked as a scrape specially? Like how user could use that, configure that?
The main point which I would care about is, Chris, you just said maybe, and I don't think it's a maybe. I would strongly argue that any user of Prometheus is able to use PromQL to some extent. I would also argue that maybe 20% of Prometheus users, more likely 2% of PromQL users, can use relabel configs.
Right. Yeah. Now the question is this kind of reducing of cardinality a type of work that only those advanced users do, because you are messing with reliability and changing what application is exposing anyway. So maybe that's actually an advanced operation, but you know,
It's
will be
only
any
one
case.
example.
Will be any case, Richie, that we are not doing relabeling, or user doesn't do any relabeling, but does the scrape recording rules, right? Maybe there is. And yeah, okay. So no matter if it's maybe or not, like how we envision that, how do you want, how user could configure them? I still don't see that exactly. What configuration point? Is it recording rule? Is it another recording rule file just called scrape? Or yeah, where we could put
So I am adding a proposal in the document.
Perfect.
In flight, maybe. Let me see what's in the link.
Yeah, so looks like
when you say scrape rules, do you mean, is this limited to per scrape, or is this limited to what is currently in that agent?
It is per scrape.
So per scrape means, just so that I get it right, it's only operates on the data that's returned by a single scrape.
Correct.
Okay.
A single scrape on a single target, which I think is too limiting if we are doing all of this effort.
so there is one. Yeah, okay, maybe not, ignore me.
Why is it too limited?
Because I do think that we have a lot of potential use cases for something where you have some basic mangling of data in an agent or even in a Prometheus, which is not only operating on one single scrape, but aggregates across different scrapes or something.
But this is recording rules, right? What's the difference between what you describe and recording rules?
I mean, fair, we don't have recording rules in agent. We can also just enable recording rules in agent, and we can just make a mode of either using this, like, again, I call it tainted, untainted, but like having almost like the colon for federation. Like, I think this would solve all those use cases in a more generic way, which is also easier for the user to actually handle and reason about.
So I agree with Björn that we are talking about two different things: enabling recording rules in agent and enabling recording rule to aggregate labels and that kind of things inside the same inside scripts. So this is two different things.
And also, no, I think, you know, Richie, you are right. That would be amazing. But the problem is you cannot make agent with recording rules, because you are essentially, from agent, you are making Prometheus, because you have to have a query layer, right? And we have to have exactly the same wall, queryable wall that Prometheus has. So there will be no difference between agent and Prometheus at this point, except disabling query API, but actually enabling it for recording rules. Am I missing something?
I mean, from this perspective, that is actually a fair point. I mean, you still wouldn't, like what you just described, still wouldn't be doing any alerting.
So maybe, Richie, do you remember what logic OpenTelemetry collector is doing? Do they have recording rules?
They have in-flight mangling of data. Right. At least that was the status like a year-ish ago, which was also roughly the time when Tom did that proof of concept thing, basically. So the overall context of it was a larger discussion within WG Prometheus, within OpenTelemetry, about this being more or less impossible in the Prometheus model. And Tom just wanted to prove that it's easy to do like in-flight PromQL, and like over a weekend he just hacked something together, which was severely limited in capabilities and everything, but just as a demo that this was actually doable. The main use case, we have Gautam joining, so maybe he can take over. The main use case of these in-flight queries within the agent or collector, as OpenTelemetry calls them, is, as far as I'm aware, aggregations and reduction of overall amount of data which you're transmitting. In their case, completely generic, but I'm also, like, with my Grafana hat on, we see this ask from customers again and again that they would like to have more and more options to just reduce the overall amount of data which makes it into the backends. I had a different point as well. Mangling. Yeah, like if you look at IoT or those use cases, they follow basically the same model like CERN and such, where you create insane amounts of data, and you have several layers of aggressively reducing this data at every processing and at every network step, to allow you to get a lot more fine-grained data out initially, and then aggressively compress or aggregate it away in the way which you currently care about. So those are the types of use cases.
So I don't know if you follow the chat, but Callum made a good point that.
Can you read it out, or can Callum read it out? Of course, again.
Yeah, Callum, are you there?
Videos can't.
Yeah, sorry, I just got dogs barking every once in a while. So I do you want me to say both the things that I said? One got missed earlier.
Yes.
Okay. So with the model you were proposing, Richie, where we would execute these recording rules and then only send that data, with the way that remote write works, that data would need to be written somewhere, right? We can't just like shove it into something. So we would need a like recording rule specific wall, I guess, and we could tell remote write to only read from that if we wanted to. Otherwise, we're like re-implementing all of remote write using some other way of grabbing the data we want to send. The other one is that, like, I think for the most part, users only really, like, the main thing they care about is doing some short period of rate interval and being able to aggregate across targets. So I don't think the issue with this per scrape idea of a recording rule is that it's per scrape. I think it was more, to me, it's more that it's per target rather than being able to aggregate across targets, right? Like, the main thing that people want to do is get an idea of, say, like resource usage or error rate across a service. So like we could just extend the agent. The agent already has essentially a head block that's just completed a lot more often, right? So we can, if we can execute the query engine across that, then does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm kind of don't see it yet that on the implementation side, you know, how this affects the existing wall implementation and so on. But I think it makes sense. Essentially, you know, being able to have generic recording rules across defined interval of time, right? Short, like minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. But how that changes the implementation side, suddenly I feel, you know, we're a little bit back on Prometheus wall implementation, really, just with reduced, yeah, not really, because we have to essentially drop the series when they are getting to remote write. So, but, you know, from the user perspective, I think that would be nice and doable.
Well, so the agent already has the wall, right? It's just compacted a lot more regularly, like minutes instead of every 2 hours. And it's the same thing for its version of the head block. What I was trying to say is that like the way remote write works is just by tailing the wall. And so if we wanted to do something like Richie was suggesting, where we would automatically only send the results of these recording rules over remote write instead of sending
5
everything.
minutes, we need to delay. Right?
Yeah. So we would either like just not write regular stuff to the wall, or have a separate wall that remote write would read these recording rule results from. But also, if users follow the best practices for recording rule names, or if we enforced those in some way where the recording rule name contains colons, then it's very easy to write a relabel rule that just says drop everything that doesn't have a colon in the metric name. Right? So, yeah.
It sounds to me that we would love to enable users with such a use case, and sounds like it will be even more amazing to allow agent generic recording rules, but there is very strong implication on like more complex implementation and some sort of weird delay where we need to wait for samples to even understand if we want to send them or not, or things like that. So there will be a little bit of more complexity for a user, yes. However, I think Bjorn kind of talked about that a little bit on the chat, is that we still would like to have this in-flight recording rules in Prometheus as well. So we might want to tackle them in two separate stages and say, we want to have recording rules, generic recording rules on agents someday, and we want to have scrape or in-flight recording rules, which will be limited, not based on the range, but only for the scrape target, within scrape target, for both Prometheus and agent. I think that's something that I would propose.
Just read it out. Björn wrote that we should have two separate efforts, but we want both. People keep writing instead of...
Yeah, we are shy.
Yeah, today is one of the weirdest dev summits we ever had, I think.
Why? Do you have it virtually, right?
No, of course, everyone is, like, at least from Grafana, everyone is at the offsite and tired and...
Yeah, exactly.
Half asleep.
Callum, with 4 dogs, you have 4 dogs. Why 1 dog is not enough for you?
Gotham is drunk. Gotham's mom, if you see this.
And one question would be if the query language for this in-flight rules would be not the full PromQL, obviously, but maybe it's so different that it doesn't even make sense to pretend it's PromQL.
I can agree with that. Like, it would be enough to have additional relabeling parameter that would say we drop this label and then we aggregate across those. No.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Agent QL or AGQL.
Flight QL.
It's getting loud in my background. Does anyone else want to do the call for consensus? Yeah.
What's the question even? There are a lot of options. So what's the vote?
No. The vote sounds like that we want to have those two things as a separate work streams, and that we want them. That's kind of the overall.
Okay. Yeah.
Thing.
Okay, let's quiet it down. So basically call for consensus for both doing flight QL and for doing relabeling per scrape, correct? Okay, I'll write something just a second. Consensus. We will explore both. Gautam, if you always click, your name is too long, and you always click it at the end of that line, and you block my reading. Yeah, fair. Okay, consensus. We will explore both the reduced feature set PromQL, FlightQL, and per scrape rule evaluation. All agreed? Anyone disagreeing? Okay. We have 9 more minutes, 8 more minutes left. Should we aim for a new topic or should we cut it off early? Both is fine to me. I'm just wanting to ask.
Cutting off is fine for me.
I have an update on the go.mod work. I have an idea and I will submit a pull request very soon about it, but I can speak about it now. So it looks like Go 1.18 is out, so we have the Go workspaces so for the moving Prometheus to V2, but I have tested that and it does not seem to be super relevant. Instead, I have been thinking about another approach, which is that we would move the CMD into a V2 package and release the libraries at v0 something. This should work just out of the box and work with all the Go tooling. We would just need to add new tags v0 something, but all the Prometheus libraries would still be released at the same version. And we would also need to retract all the versions that we have released before we joined the Go modules. But this should just all work. I have the pull request ready, I just need to document it. So the idea is that you would get Prometheus version 0.25, and that would be the Prometheus 2.25. But the libraries would be v0 something, and we would be compatible with all the Go tooling out there. And the command line tools, the CMD package would be in v2, but since it's a main package only, you cannot import it in other code, so users cannot do mistake, and we can break the APIs because it's not something that you can actually import, but it's something you can install, so you can still do Go install prom tool at v2.25. And it enables us to use a monorepo with multiple versions. I've tested that, so the v2 can import the v0 without issues. The fact that v2 can import v0 is the more disturbing thing, and I don't know if it's a Go bug or not, but it works.
Just a mirror from chat. Björn and Simon like it.
The pull request is ready. I just need to finish the documentation about it. And then we would be back on track with actually like being able to follow Go best practices, I guess.
Okay. Good. 5 minutes. Anything else, or does everyone get 5 minutes back? Okay. More praise for Julian from chat. And okay, then see you in a month at the latest.
Yeah,
Well-
see you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.
You